We've got a front axle. We've got a servo. Rear wheel steering for under 30 bucks. So we got a pack of these male and females connectors. These are the JST 1.25 GH is the type, I guess, the size. The 1.25 is the spacing between the pins. There's also a Molex version, and I'm not sure. Let's look here. Yeah, these look like the servos are using the JST version. I think the Molex version is slightly different, but they might actually work as well because they're very, very similar, and the pin spacing is the same, but these do look like they are exactly the same. So that's the JST. And remember, JST is the brand, and Molex is the brand, and then the type is the GH. The Molex version is called a Pico Blade 1.25. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to solder these together, and it's basically going to create an extension, so we don't have to do any cutting. Now, if you really wanted to get into it, you could just rewire this whole thing, open up the servo, and just get a long extension using one of these. But we like the idea of using an adapter. That way, if we ever want to use a different servo, or if the servo burns out, we can just swap out and put another servo in and not worry about it. Now, you can rewire these so they are the same color pattern. Black on black, yellow on white, and red on red. But we're just going to leave them. We don't care. As long as they match the whole way, you'll be fine. So if your black is going into the yellow, make sure the yellow goes into the yellow here, and then make sure these are the same on this end. Okay? As long as they're all the same, you're good in the same order. We don't feel like pulling all the pins out, but you can easily pop up on here. You just kind of lift on these little tabs. Not too much because you'll break them, but if you lift a little tab, you can stick an X-Acto under there or something, and then pull on the cable while you're lifting, the cables will come right out. But again, we don't really care. We're not going to flip it all around. But if you're anal, go for it. We're usually pretty anal about that stuff, but maybe I'm just not in the mood right now. I don't know. It's just too many little things to pop out, so I'm going to switch this side too, and whatever. Don't care. So let's go ahead and get this soldered in. We're just going to use red heat shrink because that's what we have. Make sure you always put your heat shrink on before you solder, or you do have to pull the pins out. And these wires, which we will link to in the description below, they're on Amazon, pretty cheap. I think they're like $7 or $8, maybe even less. I'm not 100%, but they look like they're pre-soldered. They're pre-tinted, so you shouldn't have to really even add any solder. Ideally, you'll be able to just heat them up and get on with your day. Because they think they're soldered. They may just be single strand. I didn't check that. Oh no, they have solder. Also, our soldering iron had solder on it, so there's more solder showing than what came on them, that's for sure. All right. And there you go, simple little solder. And then you can just bring your heat shrink. This isn't the right size heat shrink for these wires, but it's what we have. We do need to order some more heat shrink. The heat shrink we have is all the same diameter, and they make little kits you can buy that have a bunch of different diameters, and we need to pick one of those up. We have not gotten one of those. We did not solder much just a few months ago. Well, oh, it looks like it'll hold. That's fine. We'll just go ahead and do each one now. And there we have it, our extension. So we can go ahead and hook up our servo here, and we can test it. Let's unplug our current steering servo, just this guy here, plug in our new servo, plug in our battery. Mind you, we're using an FCX. Well, we use JST plugs on all of our batteries, We always remove the FCX24 end and just use JST on everything. And conveniently, the JST, this style of JST, will plug into the Molex or Losi style. So you just make sure your red is lined up and your black is to the white. Otherwise, you will fry the ESC. But you can just kind of come in at a little bit of an angle. I don't know if you can see that. A little bit of an angle, right? And then just kind of push it in, and it will work. And these blue batteries, which we'll link to in the description as well, fit right in there. And we've even got some Velcro, because we Velcro these on some of our rigs, but it'll fit right in there. All right, power on. Ta-da! So our extension cable works, and that should be plenty to get us to the rear of our rig. Actually, we're not even doing it on this rig. Funny, I use this one. We're going to do it on our extended wheelbase, the yellow one. This is our blue one. We don't know what we're doing with the blue one yet. So the servo and the servo horn do not come with the ball stud, and neither does the steering assembly. So there's no ball stud that comes with these two things if you were to purchase them to do rear wheel steering. So we stole this ball stud from our other FCX until FMS gets back to us telling us where to get these ball studs. I tried looking on Amazon and whatnot. There's a lot of options, but nothing that's really this one. It's a 2mm ball stud, so you could probably just use any 2mm ball stud, but I'm just I'd like it to be offered where you buy this stuff. Like, so I've reached out to them to ask them to let me know if they can add it or where we should get these, because you want to make sure it's the right diameter ball, not just the threading, but the actual ball itself. And I'd like to keep it consistent with the what hex size, which is the 1.5. So anyway, so we got that. It also doesn't come with screws, so you'll have to get the screw kit or find some screws of your own. But again, these are the 2mm or M2s. Here. And these are the M2s by, looks like 5 or 6, M2 by 6. But any M2 thread that's long enough will work. It doesn't have to be the 6. But the 6 is what the servo normally comes with when you get a stock truck. Right. So I'm really hoping that this is fairly centered when we plug it all in, because if it's not, with the stock remote, we're going to have a heck of a time trying to trim it, because you can't trim it. You can't trim left and right on the stock remote with the rear steering because you're not using normal channel. So that will be a task for sure. So once we put it all on, we'll plug it in and we'll try to make sure our servo is centered, and we'll try to get our servo horn as centered as possible, and hopefully it just works, but we'll see. So let's go ahead and take this all apart, and we'll go ahead and get this front axle on the rear. It's kind of funny, we actually went ahead and took the drive shaft end off because we're so used to having to do that when we replace axles, because the axles, even complete axles, don't come with that part, but this one does. It's so crazy. So crazy that they include all the parts that they do with these for just $12. Again, nuts. Link in the description. So it's awesome to find out, because I'm not 100% sure, you know, when you're looking at this. So this could be easily threaded on this side, obviously, but maybe it's not threaded here on the front servo mount. Awesome enough, it's threaded on both sides, so we can do our 4-link straight into our servo mount here, and it threads in on both sides, which is awesome. Like I said, some of these, especially stock FCX24s, are only threaded on one side, and even some of these aftermarket trays, like these, are only threaded on one side. So that's awesome. Don't forget to phase your drive shaft. We did that, and if you don't know what phasing your drive shaft is, it's basically making sure that your ears or your tabs on the shaft are lined up, or that your screws are the same direction, and actually, or exactly opposites, right? This screw facing up, the screw on this one will be facing down. But more importantly, it's just making sure that the ears or tabs are in line, this one in line, right? That way there's no vibration as it spins and you're articulating, right? Especially when you're in a faster rig. You'll get vibration if they're not in phase. So I go over that a lot. I try to be new person friendly. So if you don't know what stuff is, I try to explain it for you. All right. I think we're good. Let's go ahead and let's just get our wheels and tires back on, I guess. That way we can more easily tell if we're centered. I wanted to point this out again, just in case you didn't watch my 75-minute behemoth of a video tearing this entire thing down when we first got it. One of the awesome things about these axles is that the axle pin and like the rest on the axle doesn't sit on the bearings, right? So like on an FCX24, your hex here, your wheel nut hex, it's not really a wheel nut, but the wheel hex has like a little nipple that sticks out and it pushes onto the bearing if it's not hitting onto this axle pin first. And a lot of times on stock trucks, it doesn't hit this axle pin. The axle pin sits in the groove, but it doesn't actually sit all the way down onto the axle pin. So this nut will, the little ledge that's on there, or nipple or whatever, actually pushes onto the bearing, and that's why you can over tighten. The way these are set up, your hex can never hit the bearing, right? Like it sits on your pin here, and then it pushes onto kind of this lip on the axle, which means no matter how tight you tighten your wheel, no matter what, you tighten it down and strip it out completely, but you're never going to over tighten it onto the axle, causing your drive shaft to break or your motor or ESC to burn out. So that's something very cool on these trucks, and the way the axles are set up with the portals. Basically, you can tighten it down all the way. Again, you still don't want to over tighten, but you don't have to worry about over tightening onto your axle, which is sweet. We really like that. It's a smart design. I never understood why the FCX24 wheel hexes pushed onto the bearings. And I get that they want it, I mean, I do understand. They want it to not have slop, right? Because if you're pushing onto the bearing just a little, then you don't have in and out slop. See, this has got just a little bit of play in there. You probably can't even see it. There you go. Just a little bit of play. And if you were to have this wheel hex able to push all the way down to the bearing, you would eliminate some of that play, but you also, I mean, very easily can over tighten, and it means there's resistance on there. So I almost always sand those down just a little bit, just to get it so that I can actually tighten my wheel nuts down a little bit more than stock and not have to worry about over tightening as much. You don't want to do it too much if you were to sand them off on an SCX, because if you did do it too much, you would end up with more play. Like this way, this would kind of slide in and out a little bit. Not much, I mean, even if you sanded it all the way down. But you still don't want to eliminate it all the way. You want to keep it as tight as possible. But you don't want to over tighten. It's a balance. What the plan here is that we're going to use our 3-channel. That way we have a center, left and right, to control our rear steer, which means our transmission shifting cannot be on there, and we'll have to use the channel 4. Now, channel 4 is this button, which is usually our lights. You click it, lights turn on, click it, lights get brighter, click it, lights stay bright, and click and they go off. It's basically a 5-position switch. If you just plug it in and you hit this button, you're going to be like, why isn't my channel 4 doing anything? And it's because it's a dual function channel 4, which means that by just hitting the button, you'll flip through the light modes, but if you hold the button, it'll change the servo left and right. If you plug a servo in there, it'll just go all the way to one direction and just sit there, and no matter how many times you hit it, or what buttons you push on here, or dip switches you flip, nothing happens. But if you click and hold, it'll turn on, and it'll switch left and right. And it's only at 2 positions, so you only get left and right. There's no center. But left and right is just fine for our transmission servo, because it's first gear and second gear. So we're going to go ahead and swap it to that. And it is a little slow. You have to like hold it for a second, and then it goes, and you'll see that, which is why they probably put it on this switch, just because it's a little bit easier, and right? Even though it's a 3 position and you only need a 2 position, I think that out of the box, if you had to hold this to change gears, people might not have liked that as much. But now that we've got rear steering, we need that channel, so we're going to go ahead and switch it. So we're going to unplug our transmission. Actually, here, I'm going to go ahead and show you. We'll just plug it in straight to the servo here. Well, you're not going to be able to see it. Dang it. We can put our steering in there, our front steering. All right, so we'll just go ahead and take our front steering, and we're going to put it in our channel 4, just so you can see what the channel 4 does. We'll go ahead and turn her on, and see it just locks to one side. And of course we have our transmission. And then if you hit channel 4, it does nothing. But if you hold, it'll switch the other way. Hold, switch the other way. Okay, so that's how we're going to now shift from first to second. And you can see it's kind of delayed, but you're not having to shift super quick, so it's not that big of a deal. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and plug our transmission in there. And we will go ahead and plug our steering back into steering. So I needed to take a pause here because we had about 10 more minutes of video of some issues that happened. While we were swapping our servo around, something happened with our steering servo. And I don't know if it's because we kept swapping it around while the ESC was on, or what, but I've never had that happen, and the servo just stopped working. After we plugged it back into our steering, it straightened out, but then it wouldn't steer, so we unplugged it and plugged it back into channel 3, and it went full lock, because of course channel 3 was on, and it wouldn't switch when we switched it back, so we kind of unplugged it, plugged it back in, and it switched the other way, oddly, and then it never moved again. So I don't know what happened there. We have done this mod on, we switched over to a different rig from our extended wheelbase, yellow, to the blue rig. And the reason we switched from the yellow rig to the blue rig is because we found another issue. It seems like, from what FMS told me after some emails back and forth, and I'll show you the email, but the ESC on some of these, the channel 3 is set to just left and right. There is no middle or neutral or center, which is kind of odd to me, but then other rigs, like our blue rig, has a left, right, and center. And we went ahead and we tested it, and the ESC, in fact, on this rig, the yellow rig, channel 3 only has left and right. But on the blue one, we do have left, right, and center. So I would highly recommend, before doing this, unplug your steering, plug it into your channel 3, and test your channel 3 to make sure you have a full left, center, and right. If for some reason you've got one of the ESCs that only has left and right, I don't know what that's about. It's very odd that you would have a 3-position switch on the remote and only use the full left and full right, especially when you have a channel 4 that does full left and full right. So we're really disappointed in that. We're still working with FMS to kind of figure out what's going on there. I don't think they're going to send us another ESC, but it actually is very annoying. All the ESCs should act the same, and channel 3 with a 3-position switch on the remote should have left, right, and center. But again, I just recommend checking your ESC. All you got to do is unplug your transmission. You can even hear it in the transmission. You can hear the 3 positions. But if you want to be 100% sure, unplug your transmission, plug in your steering. Make sure it's off before you do that, just in case. And then you can test your 3-position and see if your front steering goes left, right, and center. If it does, you can do rear wheel steering with that channel. If it doesn't, I guess you're SOL, because there's no channel that has 3 positions on this ESC, if not channel 3. So that kind of sucks. Here's the email that they wrote me. And let's go ahead and get back to the video. You can kind of see me discovering this issue, and then we'll wrap it up and get the rig running. In the end, we do end up with our 4-wheel steering on our stock remote with the same parts that I mentioned. Just an axle and servo and our wiring harness, and we're good to go. So I want to show you the difference between these two receivers for some reason. On this one, you can see the servo will have, we're in the channel 3, has a 3-position switch. Left, center, right. Right, this is normally the transmission. But if I take this servo and I plug it in here, channel 3, it only goes full left and full right. Why is the 3-position switch not working on this receiver? It's not the remotes, because watch this. I will turn this off, we will rebind, and we'll use this remote on here now, and it still does it. There's no 3 position, it's still only 2 positions, whereas this receiver gives you the 3 positions. How do I get this to have 3 positions on this receiver? Also, just swapping around these servos apparently caused my main installed servo, this front servo, to be completely dead. So I don't know what's going on there. Regardless, we've got a working rig. All right. It is as simple as getting a new front axle, which is $12.99, getting a steering servo, which I believe is $10.99. You need the ball joint and the 2 screws to mount your servo, and then an extended wire to reach up to your ESC. That's as simple as it is, but you've got to have the ESC that supports 3-position. Lucky enough, the splines and the servo and everything line up, so we didn't need to trim. It does go straight, If for some reason it's off, you need to try to get it as straight as you can on your servo horn and the spline. You could trim out your spline a little and try to adjust your servo horn that way. That's an option. Another option is to change your steering link. Different length steering link would adjust your trim. But yeah, with no trim on the channel 3, if for some reason you're not centered, when you're centered, if you're slightly off, then you're just going to have to deal with it having a little bit of a crab walk, or figure out a link, or you're going to have to upgrade all of your electronics. But it seems to line up just straight and just fine, so that is fantastic. Another option, if you can't find the ball joint, is you can upgrade to the McHugh front end steering links and use your front end one on the rear, or just upgrade both, and you don't need to use that ball joint with the McHugh front steering links. But yeah, I would call this successful, unless of course you have a rig that only does full left and full right on the channel 3. I think everybody should reach out to FMS and tell them we want our channel 3s, especially if you want rear wheel steering. I think it's ridiculous that they would take the left, right, and center off of channel 3 when we have a 3-position switch. Yeah, it's just stupid. I think what they were trying to say in their email is that the engineers were having issues guaranteeing the neutral would work. Because if you have 3-position on the servo in the transmission and you go to the middle, it would put it in neutral, but not all the time. It wasn't always perfect, so maybe they thought because you wouldn't always get neutral when you put it in the center, that they should just remove it and have it full first gear, full second gear. I would rather have the neutral. I think 99% of people out there would rather have the full 3-position, or maybe they should switch it to channel 4, right? Because that works as well. And our lights still work too. So let's get our body back on and I'll show you that. And they're not affected by the transmission. So you can function both the lights and the transmission without affecting each other, which is pretty awesome. Anyway, let's go run it some. in spite of all the issues that we had along the way and finding out that some rigs don't have 3-channel steering, we still had a blast. This little guy is super fun. Rear wheel steering just kind of takes it to another level. We didn't show any rock crawling stuff. I know. We just didn't have time on this one. And anybody who has crawled with rear wheel steering already knows. It's basically cheater mode. You're able to hit lines that you wouldn't normally hit just by flipping a switch, and you can kind of swing the back end around and just do some pretty awesome stuff. We just wanted to kind of bash it around on the dirt track just for some fun and show you. It's got its self-righting abilities when it flips over. If you've got traction, you can flip it upright again, and yeah, it makes it fun, and it's a fairly cheap upgrade. Again, just make sure your ESC has the proper channel 3, and yeah. All right, guys, thank you for watching. I hope you subscribe if you like the content we create. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up, hit the bell button. Make sure you comment below. Why don't you comment 4WS, 4-wheel steering, 4WS down below if you're still watching. And yeah, get out there and run your cars. Smash them, crash them, and bash them, but don't break the expensive parts.